Just a Tuesday in her kitchen, her back to him, making tea, and the feeling had been so plain and so complete that saying it was simply the accurate description of what was happening in his chest. Back came her answer, quiet and real, and for one long moment everything was exactly right. So, where does a love story like that break? Not in a fight, not in a betrayal, not in the clean, dramatic way of things that end loudly enough to justify the ending. It broke in a boardroom in London on a Wednesday in December, when Damien's mother placed a folder on the table between them and said, quietly, pleasantly, with the warmth of a woman who had spent decades getting her way without raising her voice, that the Okonkwo family had expressed serious interest in formalizing a relationship between their daughter and Damien before his 31st birthday, that the merger discussions with Okonkwo Logistics would move considerably faster if the families were aligned. That this was, of course, entirely his decision. That smile meant the opposite. He had not said yes in that boardroom. He had not said anything, but he had not said no. Turning away from the window took effort he did not show. He told himself he needed time. He flew back to Chicago and stood in Zara's kitchen, watching her make tea, and said nothing about London. He said nothing for 3 weeks. The second surrender came at Christmas, when his father called and used the word legacy 4 times in 8 minutes. The third came in January, when the Okonkwo merger talks accelerated, and his mother sent a message that said simply, "The family needs to know your position, Damien." The fourth was the night he did not call Zara back. The fifth was the morning he did not call her after that. By February, Zara called him. Her voice, when he answered, was the careful flat voice of someone who had already decided they were done, being confused. "Are you choosing something else?" she asked. Saying no was available to him. He could have said it and meant it, and paid the cost of meaning it. The merger fraction, the inheritance, the version of himself his family had been constructing since birth. Real costs. He was not naive about them. Nothing came out. 4 seconds on a phone line. 2 words arrived through the phone. "Okay, Damien." She ended the call, almost convinced himself, in the months that followed, that he had made the right choice. Almost, then a child laughed across a lakefront walk in October, and every one of those surrenders came back at once. Back on the walk, back in the cold, 5 years dissolved in the space of one sound. And now Damien Ashford was standing on a lakefront promenade with his fiancée's hand resting in the crook of his arm, and his entire body pointed in one direction, like something had grabbed him by the sternum and turned him. Camille noticed. "Damien." Her voice carried that particular note. Not quite concern, not quite question, the tone of a woman who had learned that when Damien went suddenly still, something in the room had shifted, and she was the last to know what. She followed his eye line across the walk. 40 feet away, Zara Mensah was crouched on the ground, not posed, not composed. Not the version of herself that existed in photographs. Damien had spent 2 years convincing himself he had stopped studying. This Zara was on one knee on the lakefront concrete in a dark green coat that had seen better seasons, wiping something, juice, from the color spreading across the boy's jacket, with the focused, slightly exhausted efficiency of a woman who had performed this task 100 times today and expected to perform it 100 more before sunset. The air around her carried that particular autumn mix of lake water and cold concrete and something green underneath. The smell of a city preparing to let summer go. The girl was spinning, arms out, head back, completely committed to the spinning in the way of children who have not yet learned that joy requires an audience or an occasion. Her braids flew, her boots were mismatched, one yellow, one red, and she seemed not only unbothered by this fact, but possibly responsible for it. Kofi had stopped laughing. He was watching his mother clean his jacket with the patient resignation of a child who understands that adults have processes, and those processes must be respected, even when they are inconvenient. Zara had not looked up. This was the window that should have given Damien time to collect himself, to arrange his face, to find the composure of a man who had learned that the world rewarded control. He had approximately 15 seconds of her not looking. 15 seconds to step back, turn around, suggest to Camille that they take the other route, the longer one that curved away from the water. 15 seconds. He used none of them. "You're staring," Camille said. Quiet, precise, calm and flat, the answer left him before he decided to give it. "I know someone." Camille looked at the woman crouching on the path, then back at Damien. Something moved through her face, fast, controlled, filed away before it could be named. "Someone," she repeated. Before he answered, Kofi solved the problem for everyone. The boy pulled free of his mother's hands with the boneless ease that children deploy when they have decided something is finished, turned, and ran. Directly, purposefully, with the absolute conviction of someone who had spotted something across the concrete that required immediate investigation. He ran straight toward Damien, not because he knew. He could not have known, 4 years old, and carrying no information that should have sent him in this direction, rather than any other. But children navigate by frequencies that adults have long since stopped hearing, and something in the air on that promenade sent Kofi across the concrete at a dead run toward the man who was his father. Zara looked up to follow him and found Damien looking back. "Now, right here, at this exact second, I need you to stop. Because what you just watched happen is the thing this story has been building toward since the first frame. Not the children, not the coat, not Camille standing 2 feet away with her hand suddenly no longer in the crook of Damien's arm. The look. That ambushed, simultaneous look of 2 people who did not get to prepare, who both arrived at the same instant with nothing arranged and nothing managed, and 5 years of everything standing between them like weather. Neither of them moved. Kofi reached Damien's legs and grabbed his coat. Both small hands closed around the fabric at Damien's knee. The easy, instinctive grip of someone claiming something that feels familiar. He looked up at the tall man above him with serious, assessing eyes and said the word that would live inside Damien's chest for the rest of his life. "Hi." One word, completely unburdened. A 4-year-old's greeting, nothing more, delivered without any awareness of what it was detonating in the man above him. Damien looked down at the boy holding his coat. Something cracked open in his face, a visible fracture in the composure he had maintained for 5 years. And Camille saw it, and Zara saw it, and the wind off the lake did not care about it at all. Before you find out what Damien said next, and what Zara did in the 3 seconds that followed, make sure you subscribe to this channel right now. Hit that button and turn on notifications. Because this story is about to go somewhere none of us are ready for, and you do not want to find out what happens from someone else's comment section. Subscribe. Then come back. Still here. Because Zara Mensah, who had spent 5 years building a life that did not require Damien Ashford to be whole, was now standing 30 feet away on a cold October promenade, watching her 4-year-old son hold a fistful of his father's coat. Amara had stopped spinning. Even she could feel it. Whatever it was, the change in the air that arrives when something inevitable finally stops being future and becomes present. She stood with her arms at her sides and her mismatched boots planted on the concrete, and looked at her brother, then at the tall man, then at her mother. Zara's face gave nothing, but her hands, both of them, hanging at her sides, empty now that the juice box was gone and the backpack was on the ground, were absolutely still. The stillness of someone who has been surprised into a territory she prepared for and discovered that preparation changes nothing. Across the distance between them, she and Damien looked at each other. That small fist had not let go. Kofi. Zara's voice crossed the distance between them, low, controlled. The register of a mother calling a child back without alerting anyone around her that something has gone wrong. Not panicked, not sharp. The voice of a woman operating on pure discipline in an encounter that was threatening to dissolve every wall she had spent 5 years constructing. Kofi did not move. He was looking up at Damien with the open, unhurried assessment of a child who has not yet learned that staring is rude, studying this tall stranger the way he studied everything that interested him. Completely, without apology, from the shoes upward. His fist stayed closed around the coat fabric. Damien could not move either, not from shock, or not only from shock, from the paralysis of a man whose body has understood something 3 full seconds before his mind has caught up to it. He was looking at a boy who had his jaw, his brow, the angle of his nose, and those eyes, dark, wide, serious in the way that Damien's own eyes were serious in every photograph his mother had ever taken of him as a child. He was looking at himself, 4 years old, and completely unaware of the detonation he was causing. Kofi finally released the coat. He turned and ran back toward Zara with the same total commitment he had deployed, running toward her, boots loud on the concrete. Because Amara had started spinning again, and that was clearly the more pressing matter now. Zara caught him without looking, one arm out, automatic, the practiced catch of a woman who had been intercepting this child for 4 years. Without ever needing to look, she pulled him against her side, straightened, and looked at Damien across the promenade. Camille spoke first. "Are you going to introduce us?" Her voice was pleasant, measured. Every gram of composure she had been raised to maintain deployed without visible effort. Damien turned to look at her. In the 2 seconds of that look, something passed between them that required no words. The terrible communication of 2 people who understand simultaneously that the ground beneath a relationship has shifted, and neither is ready to discuss it yet. "Zara," he said. Just her name, placed in the air between all of them like an object he was still deciding what to do with. Across the promenade she moved, not away, toward. Zara Mensah walked across that 30 feet of lakefront concrete with the deliberate calm of a woman who has decided that running is not available to her. And composed retreat is not in her character. She stopped 4 feet from Damien Ashford for the first time in 5 years. Up close, in the flat October light, she looked exactly like herself. Not harder, not softer, not worn down or built up. Just herself, fully, which was somehow the most devastating thing she could possibly have been. Kofi pressed against her leg. Amara materialized at her other side, having abandoned the spinning with the instant decisiveness of a child who has identified that the adult situation is more interesting than her previous activity. Damien, Zara said. One word, his name in her mouth, carrying 5 years of everything and releasing none of it. Camille extended her hand. Camille Harrington, Damien's fiancée. She said it cleanly. No cruelty in it, just the precise deployment of a fact, placed on the table with the careful intention of a woman establishing coordinates in a geography she did not yet fully understand. Zara shook the hand. Zara Mensah. A pause, brief and complete. Congratulations. The word landed differently than Camille intended to receive it, and differently than Zara intended to deliver it. It landed in the space between all four of them, in the cold air above a lake that had no opinions about any of this, and stayed. Damien looked at the twins. Amara was watching him with the merciless attention of a child who has decided an adult is interesting and has not yet developed the instinct to disguise this. Her head tilted to the right. She studied him the way a scientist studies a specimen. Not unkindly, just thoroughly. A pebble near his boot had become Kofi's primary concern. Therefore, Damien asked. His voice came out level. He was proud of that. In the distant way, a person is proud of small technical achievements, while the larger world collapses around them. One word back. Yes. Because she knew that expression, had seen it in her own mirror, once, a long time ago, in the first weeks after the twins were born, when she had looked at two faces and understood with wordless certainty that she would burn the world down before she let it diminish them. Now he was wearing it. Looking at children he was only now understanding were his. Beside him, all pleasant composure had quietly dissolved. Camille had replaced it with something quieter and more honest. The stillness of a woman standing at the edge of an enormous thing. Looking at its full dimensions for the first time, she did not reach for Damien's arm. He did not reach for hers. Amara tugged Zara's coat. "Mama!" Her voice was a stage whisper, which meant everyone heard it. Why is that man looking at us like that? For a fraction of a second, just one, something moved across Zara's face. Not a smile. Closer to the expression that comes just before one. The involuntary softening of someone ambushed by the honesty of a child in an impossible situation. Down her eyes went, finding her daughter. He just recognized something, she said quietly. Sometimes that takes people by surprise. That answer received the gravity it deserved. "Oh," said Amara. Then she looked back at Damien with renewed interest, as though recognition were a quality that made someone more worth examining rather than less. Already looking, already decided. He crouched to her level. "Hi," he said, mirroring her brother's word back into the universe, because it was the only word small enough and true enough to say. Those eyes, Zara's eyes, warm and direct, giving away exactly as much as they intended to, and not one fraction more. Looked back at him. "You have a sad face," she said, delivered without cruelty, purely observational. The way children state truths that adults spend years learning to keep behind their teeth. Above him, Damien heard Zara draw a breath. Looking up was not available to him in that moment. He stayed crouched, level with a 4-year-old, who had just said the most accurate thing anyone had said to him in 5 years and felt the full weight of every surrender. The boardroom, The phone call, the 4 seconds of silence every morning after, arrive in his body at once. "Yeah," he said softly, "I think I do." Up he stood, looked at Zara, and took one step forward. One step. That was all it was, physically. 12 inches of lakefront concrete, 1 foot placed in front of the other. The most ordinary movement a human body makes. But the step landed in the space between all of them, like something dropped from a great height, and every person on that promenade felt the landing differently. Camille felt it as a door closing. Zara felt it as confirmation of what she had been bracing against, since their eyes met across the walk. The dread of a woman who knows that the thing she has been outrunning has finally closed the distance and is standing close enough to touch. Kofi was watching a pigeon. "Zara." Damien's voice came out low. Not a greeting, not an apology. Something between the two. The register of a man who has arrived somewhere important and does not yet have the language for what he needs to say, but needs to say something before the encounter seals over and becomes simply another thing that did not happen. Her jaw tightened. Just slightly. Just enough. "This isn't the place," she said. Flat and honest, his answer arrived before he decided to give it. "I know. My children are right here. I know that too." Quiet stretched between them, taut, the kind of silence that carries more content than most conversations. Amara had migrated to stand directly in front of Damien, looking up at him with the unblinking focus of a child who has appointed herself quality control officer of this interaction. Kofi had abandoned the pigeon and was now leaning against Zara's leg, watching with considerably less investment than his sister, but watching nonetheless. Camille had not moved. From 3 feet behind Damien, she stood with her coat buttoned to the collar and her hands at her sides, and her face arranged in the composed, unreadable expression that had been her greatest asset since the age of 14. She was looking at the twins, not at Damien, not at Zara, at the twins, studying them with the careful attention of a woman who has just received information she did not ask for and is understanding exactly what it means. She was not a foolish woman. "Walk with me," Damien said to Zara. 5 minutes, back came one word. "No, then tell me one thing." His voice dropped further. "Just one." Zara looked at him. The full, direct look she had been withholding since their eyes met. The look that cost her something to give, because it required her to see him clearly, which meant seeing all of it. The man he had been, the choice he had made. The 4 seconds of silence on a phone line in February that had rerouted the entire geography of her life. She gave it to him anyway, because she was not someone who looked away from hard things, even when looking was expensive. "Ask it," she said. No framing, no architecture. Just, "Did you know when you left? Did you know?" For a long time she said nothing. Around them, Chicago moved at its usual indifferent pace, joggers passing. A cyclist cutting wide around their small frozen group, the lake doing what the lake always did, regardless of what happened on its shore. Only Damien needed this answer. Only Camille, still and watchful behind him. Only the two small people pressed against their mother's sides, too young to understand the question and old enough to feel its weight. "No," Zara said. "I found out after." A breath. Then, "And you didn't. Why didn't you tell me?" Something moved through her face. Not anger, not grief. Something older than both. The look of a woman who has answered this question inside her own mind 10,000 times and is now delivering the answer to the person who should have received it years ago. Because you had already answered the question that mattered, she said. 4 seconds, Damien. I asked you a direct question and you gave me 4 seconds of silence. That was your answer. A pause, brief and complete. Everything I decided afterward came from that answer. He had nothing to say to that, not because she was wrong. Because she was entirely, specifically, documentably right. And he knew it, with the same certainty that he had known it standing in his mother's boardroom in London, holding a folder with another woman's photograph inside it, saying nothing, when saying nothing was itself the most consequential thing he had ever done. Amara tugged Zara's coat again. Mama, I'm cold. The suspended weight of the encounter broke with the clean simplicity of a child's honest complaint. Down her eyes went, reorganizing entirely around the small person pulling at her coat. Okay, baby. Into the giraffe backpack her hand went, producing a small red hat. She placed it on Amara's head with both hands, straightening it with the focused tenderness of a ritual performed 100 times. Better, Amara confirmed. Better. Then she looked at Damien. You should have a hat, despite everything. Despite Camille standing 6 feet away, and the question still hanging in the air, and 5 years of consequence, pressing down from every direction. Damien almost smiled. Probably, he said. Straightening, she reclaimed the giraffe backpack. Took Kofi's hand with her right and Amara's with her left. 2 small warm anchors, the weight of a life built without him, real and complete, and entirely hers. One final look at Damien, not with anger, not with love, or what remained of it after 5 years, of converting it into something more functional, with the clear-eyed assessment of a woman who has looked at a hard thing directly and decided what she is and is not willing to do with it. My number is the same, she said quietly. If you decide you want to be their father, not my history, not an explanation for what you chose, their father. A beat, precise and final. That's the only conversation I have left to have with you. Turned. Walked down the lakefront promenade she moved, one child on each side, the green coat catching the wind off the lake. Not once looking back, Damien watched her go. Behind him, Camille said nothing. She had been saying nothing for the past 6 minutes, with the deliberate quality of a woman who understands that silence is sometimes the most powerful form of speech available. Now she stepped forward to stand beside him, not touching, just parallel, the two of them watching the retreating shape of a woman and 2 children growing smaller against the grey October sky. How long ago? Camille asked. 2 words back. 5 years. A pause. The lake moved. The wind moved. Everything moved except the 2 of them. Are they yours? Longest pause of all. Yes, Damien said, absorbed in silence. 3 breaths measured, and even. Camille processed what she had just been handed. Then, you have a phone call to make. Not a verdict. Not a dismissal. Something more complicated and more generous than either. The words of a woman who understood that the situation was larger than her feelings about it, and who was choosing, at considerable personal cost, to be clear-eyed about what it required. Back the way they had come, she walked alone. Damien stood on the lakefront, with the wind coming off Lake Michigan, and the sound of the city behind him, and the question Zara had left pressing against the inside of his chest, like something that needed an answer he had not yet earned the right to give. His number was the same. He looked at his phone. 4 seconds of silence on a phone line built 5 years of consequence. Zara didn't leave because she stopped loving him. She left because he answered her question without saying a word. Now he has a number and a decision. Which matters more to you, what he chose, or what it cost her? Subscribe and tell me below.